What? So how far out are you booking now compared to 9 months ago?
9 months ago, I was booked about 6 months out, sometimes a full 12 months for certain things. And I had contracts, for a lot of the private events and corporate events that were, sometimes 2 years out. Now I'm lucky to have 2 months out, fully booked, and that third month is really sparse. And I think it's going to get. It's also we're leading into the slowest time of the year for gig workers and musicians. January, February is notoriously slow, and so it's all about, again, just for me, capturing some of those opportunities and trying to have those conversations and being flexible, because people aren't willing to pay or able to pay what they used to. So it's become a volume game. Like, how many gigs can I squeeze into 1 week to make sure that I'm hitting the marks that I need to make? And then doing that in a safe way that doesn't destroy my voice or my fingers. You have to make some adjustments. And so if I have to start taking some breaks because I've got doubled up shows for like a solid week, then you need to do that. But that also only helps you because the flexibility that you're willing to go, you have that authentic conversation with the people who are booking you and saying, hey, so this is the situation I'm in right now. This is what I'm doing. I can fit you in. This is how I'm going to do it. And they respect you a lot for, one, being honest with them about where you're at and what you need and what you can and cannot do. And then because you're willing to reveal that self, it's sharing vulnerability, as a business owner, which a lot of people don't do. They try to put on the brave face all the time. But if I'm telling you the reality on the ground for me, and I think that it develops the rapport to a deeper level of respect of like, well, you didn't need to share that with me, but I really appreciate you being honest with me. Hey, let's see what we can do to make this work and make it work on a regular basis. So then you're
What do
able to
you
have those conversations.
what do you think it's going to take to see your big 10, 15, 20,000 person crowds again?
I think that that's going to be really dependent on, ambitiously, I would like to say that it would be in spring. We would start seeing some of that, but that really depends on how winter fares. It's the beginning of like flu season on top of, what we're already dealing with the pandemic, and it'll depend on, whether or not there's continued development of, the uh, whatever vaccines are being developed, but also an understanding of how to combat and really help people survive, all of this medically, but then also psychologically, right? Like, I think they're gonna. My hope is that they don't try to force a lot of these events to happen because people have gone so stir crazy that like they're worried about, the mental well being of a lot of people in communities that are very used to going out, and
Right.
like that, the mental state, I think, is something that music specifically will be able to help with, but it has to be done in a very responsible way.
Well, that's something that I've thought about, mentioned here many times is, let's just say that like it goes away today, right? Today's the date. It's been 7, 8 months since it's been around in the States, but that's 7 or 8 months of compounding interest that is going to take 7 or 8 months and then a lot to get people to start feeling really, not everyone, but a substantial amount of people to feel comfortable in there. And
Yeah.
what's interesting about that is I grew up in a society. I feel like I grew up in a society, and maybe Tim has, and maybe Sam, you have too. Is like where you just man through stuff, right? So like, oh, I'm a little sick, I'll just man through it, and man
Yeah.
throughing it might be the wrong kind of word, but
Yeah.
it's just something that you get through over and over and over again. Is that something that you think is going to? Are we going to see less of that into the future? Like, how does that kind of lifestyle continue on now that we've gone through 2020?
Well, my hope is that, we won't. My hope is that we are emotionally intelligent enough creatures at this point that we won't just gut it out. Which we have a tendency to do. That's very, you know, ingrained into a lot of
Gutting
the
out
way.
is a lot better. That's a lot better way to call it. Gutting it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and because I mean, we do that. I was raised in a very similar way by a very strong military man as father who, he showed no emotions, and I was desperate for him to tell me that he was proud, like, but it was like, we're men and we show no emotions, and we you don't smile for pictures, like all of that stuff. And in my personal growth, I really took a hard look in the mirror, and I realized that, one, being vulnerable doesn't mean that you're weak, doesn't mean you're incapable. And being willing to find help or even delay instant gratification for a safer way of continued gratification, that's something that personally I've taken. And I hope that as a society, as a people, we can do that as well. Where it's like, all right, well, what's the most sustainable way that we can get back to the normalcy, or bring back some of the normalcy into our lives that allows everybody to recover? Like, not, so like you said, so if it was today and it was gone, um, do I see musicians getting back to work immediately? No, I think that the ripples of this has changed the landscape, and we will probably not see what the new landscape settles out to be for at least a year after that's done, because
Smaller venues might
businesses are
be
still
better
going to
for
be
you
pinching
guys.
pennies until, yeah, and that's, I think it's going to come down to, then what are they willing to pay when things open back up, because they're trying to draw people back in. Like, instead of it being a value added service to have a musician be at one of these places, it would be, this is now ingrained in what we do. We've seen that people are desperate for this, and it's a part of their lives that they really, really don't want to go away. So let's do what we can to bring that back. And the only way you bring it back in a sustainable way for both guests and the business is to bring in quality. And we all know that to get a quality product, you sometimes have to pay a little bit more, but that investment pays off in the end.
Right. Do you think that the reason that what do you call it, gutting through mindset, do you think that the reason that's been explored more is because we've had a lot more voices, where throughout time we've only had, let's just say, a handful of channels to actually be able to consume, right? Access to a handful of ways. And now, because we have a cornucopia called the internet, a cornucopia of things called the internet, we're able to see a lot more voices. Do you think that's why maybe stuff like this has opened up? You talked about meditation. I meditate a good amount. I think Tim does too. Like, those were things that were just, I've used the word in the past, frowned upon. Is it because we're just seeing a lot more things out there that we can explore on our own, or do you think it's something else?
Well, I think it's, I would say that right now, like, the personal growth thing is trendy, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but like with a lot of trends, there's always a counterculture, or like, even sometimes a cancel culture of, like, certain things that have become trendy and new agey. And when there are more voices to listen to, or to hear, or to saturate the environment, I found that a lot of people just kind of go to their default, because too many voices is overwhelming, and they don't know which voice really is the one that they want to listen to. And I know that often in my own head, when I'm deciding strategy or trying to talk my way through an idea, the more voices that I have, after a certain number of voices that give me some perspectives that I really need to consider, when it's overwhelming number of voices and considerations that I'm making, I kind of shut down, because I'm just like, man, there's just too many voices right now. I need to, like, get to, like, that one voice, or those few voices that really guide me to, like, through this effectively. And so I think that some people are just, stalwarts. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to go against this and go with what I was raised on. And a lot of people are like, well, there's too many different ways that I could possibly change my mind. So, like, I'm just not going to do anything at all. And then there are people who are, changing because it's, oh, Instagram told me I should change today, so that's what I'm going to do.
That's funny.
So I think that there's a lot of reasons as to why we're kind of seeing what we're seeing right now, and it all comes down to the fact that we're organisms that are under tremendous amounts of stress right now, just in general. And so
it is nice that we have options, though, where before it seems like it was a lot less options. Hey.